There is a U.S. state where the average person born today can expect to live past 80 years old, a life expectancy that would rank among the best in the entire world if that state were its own country. Now, go to the other end of the very same nation. There is a U.S. state where the average newborn's life expectancy sits closer to 72 years, nearly a full decade shorter for someone born under the exact same flag, the exact same federal government, and the exact same national healthcare framework. An almost 9-year gap in how long you're expected to live based entirely on which state you happen to be born in. By the end of this video, we'll also look at how the best state in America actually compares to the best performing countries in the world. And the answer might be more humbling than you'd expect. Let's get into it. According to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, Hawaii has held the top spot for life expectancy at birth among all 50 states for years running, with the most recent state life tables putting Hawaii's total life expectancy at 80.0 years, including 83.0 years for women, figures that placed it first in the nation for both total and female life expectancy in the CDC's most recent full report. Here's what researchers and health officials point to as the actual explanation, rather than simply nice weather. Hawaii has one of the lowest uninsured rates of any state in the country at roughly 3.2%, meaning the overwhelming majority of residents have consistent access to preventative care and ongoing management of chronic conditions before they become fatal emergencies. The state also reports comparatively low rates of smoking and obesity relative to national averages, along with a cultural emphasis on fresh produce, seafood-forward diets, and outdoor physical activity that researchers link directly to better long-term cardiovascular and metabolic health outcomes. Here's the detail that tends to genuinely surprise people. Researchers studying Hawaii's outcomes also point to social connectedness as a measurable factor, not just a nice-sounding cultural detail. Tightly connected, multi-generational communities have been linked in public health research to lower mortality rates, independent of diet or healthcare access alone. And Hawaii's relatively close-knit island communities are frequently cited as an example of this effect in practice. In other words, Hawaii's top ranking isn't attributable to any single cause. It's the compounding result of high healthcare access, comparatively healthy behavior patterns, and strong social infrastructure, all reinforcing each other at once. All right, hold that picture of a state where healthcare access, diet, and community connection are all reinforcing each other in the same direction. And now go to the opposite end of the same country, where several of those same factors are working against residents instead. Mississippi has consistently ranked last among all 50 states for life expectancy at birth in CDC data for well over a decade, with recent figures placing the state's average life expectancy at approximately 71.9 years, nearly 9 years shorter than Hawaii's, and notably below the current U.S. national average of roughly 78.4 years. Here's what public health researchers point to as the primary drivers, and consistent with the structural patterns seen in similar state-level health comparisons, these are largely tied to systemic and economic factors rather than individual behavior alone. Mississippi has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, with roughly 18% of residents living below the poverty line, a factor consistently linked in national research to reduced access to nutritious food, preventative health care, and safe environments for physical activity. The state also reports the second highest obesity rate in the country, along with elevated rates of diabetes, heart disease, and stroke, conditions that compound each other and are all strongly correlated with limited healthcare access in national data. Here's the detail that tends to genuinely land with people once they think about it. The gap isn't evenly distributed even within Mississippi itself. County-level data show some Mississippi counties with life expectancies in the mid to upper 70s, while others fall into the mid-60s. A range low enough that, if compared internationally, would place those specific communities behind countries like Honduras or El Salvador on global life expectancy rankings, despite being part of the world's largest economy. Here's the detail that connects directly back to Hawaii. Researchers consistently find that the same three factors driving Hawaii's high ranking, healthcare access, chronic disease rates, and economic stability, are simply operating in the opposite direction in Mississippi. This isn't a story about two different populations making different individual choices about health. It's a story about the same handful of structural variables producing dramatically different outcomes depending on which side of them a state happens to land on.
So now we've had one state performing near the top of the entire developed world, and another falling behind countries not typically associated with the term developed at all. Let's zoom out and see how the best state in America actually stacks up against the best performing countries on Earth. Japan currently holds one of the highest national life expectancies in the world, with figures regularly cited in the 84 to 85 year range, depending on the specific year and data source. Meaning even Hawaii, the single best performing US state, still falls several years short of matching the leading country in the world, let alone the national average most Americans actually experience.
Here's what makes this comparison genuinely worth sitting with. Researchers who study why the United States trails many peer nations, even in its best-performing regions, consistently point to the same underlying structural difference. Countries like Japan combine universal healthcare access with strong preventive care infrastructure and comparatively low rates of chronic disease at a population-wide level, meaning even their lower-performing regions rarely fall as far behind their national average as Mississippi does relative to Hawaii. The US, by contrast, shows some of the widest internal life expectancy gaps of any developed nation, precisely because access to the factors driving longevity varies so dramatically by state, county, and income level. Here's the detail that tends to genuinely land with people once they think about it. This reframes the entire Hawaii versus Mississippi comparison in a slightly humbling way. Hawaii isn't just the best state in America, it's proof that genuinely excellent, globally competitive health outcomes are achievable within the existing US system. Mississippi isn't a story about a health outcome that's simply impossible to fix. It's a story about the same achievable outcome sitting on the other side of a gap defined mostly by healthcare access, poverty, and chronic disease prevention rather than any unchangeable factor. And here's the quietly important closing point. The distance between Hawaii and Mississippi is almost exactly the same size as the distance between Hawaii and the best performing countries on Earth, meaning the US doesn't just have a global gap to close, it has two gaps of roughly equal size stacked on top of each other, and one of them exists entirely within its own borders.
Two states, same country, same federal government, same national healthcare framework, and a life expectancy gap of nearly 9 years between them. One state ranks among the healthiest places on Earth. The other falls behind nations not typically grouped with major developed economies at all. And even America's best state still trails the world's leading countries by several years. A reminder that the story here isn't really about two different states making different choices. It's about how unevenly the same basic ingredients for a long life are actually distributed across one country. If data-driven public health episodes like this are something you want more of, let me know in the comments. And subscribe, because next episode is heading back to something a little stranger and further from home.